Hello, everyone. Here we are again. Welcome. I'm Joachim, co-founder of Step Up Labs, where we help you to create a lifestyle you want, doing what you love. So this is a kind of like a special episode for me, as well, many of you know that I live as a nomad. I live around the world. I travel, I explore constantly, and I don't really have a home base anymore for the moment. Just to give you an idea, in the past 2 months, I've lived in Budapest, Stockholm, Porto, Lisbon, Barcelos, and then Turnhout and Ghent. And now I'm doing this Facebook Live session from the town where I was born, Ostende, at the seaside in Belgium. And actually, I'm only a couple of 100 meters away from the hospital where I was actually born, which is quite special for a nomad like me. So yeah, this feels great. And I wanted to talk to you today about something that a lot of people mentioned after my previous talk, which was about work-life balance. A lot of people contacted me and they recognize the problem. Obviously, many people have work-life balance issues. And one of the core problems with this is that when you sit down to work, very often you're not very productive. And so doing the things you need to do takes a lot longer than what you imagined. So today I want to talk about advanced productivity, systems, models, and mindsets that really work to actually get stuff done so that you can work less hours and do more of what you love and have a healthier work-life balance. So to talk about productivity, we need to start talking about the opposite, everyone's favorite devil, procrastination. What exactly is procrastination? Well, the definition is the action of delaying or postponing something. Now, this is the point where I can interject a little funny thing. There's an interesting TED Talk about procrastination by Tim Urban, the author of the blog Wait But Why. And I'm saying this because it was kind of like my personal challenge. A little shout out to Victoria. Victoria, if you're seeing us, hi. Because both Victoria and I absolutely love the blog Wait But Why. We think it's brilliant. And if you don't know it, you should check it out. It's really nice. And so the author of that blog, Tim Urban, did a TED Talk about procrastination. That is quite funny. If not super informative, maybe, but it's worth a watch. I'll post it in the comments under this video so you can watch it. But so procrastination. We tend to think very often that we procrastinate because we're just lazy or we're not in the right mindset to actually do the work. If we just focus more or if we just work harder, the procrastination will go away. But that's not really how it works. Procrastination is not so much about the work. Procrastination is about your emotions. Procrastination is about how you feel, basically. Procrastination is avoiding what hurts. We naturally feel that we don't want to do what hurts us, and that makes us feel bad. So we naturally avoid doing things that we perceive as emotionally negative. And very often that is work. A lot of work that we need to do is seen as emotionally negative. But sometimes this might also be not work, things that you're struggling with, emotional things that are going on inside of you, maybe about your relationships or whatever. And that also sometimes means that we will procrastinate because of something that's going on inside of us. So it's good to be aware of that. Now, basically that means procrastination is a form of emotional control. And that brings me to a really interesting quote that I read, I think last year, and that has stayed with me for a very long time because I couldn't really make sense of it. And that quote is, behavior is the control of perception. I kind of fell off my chair the first time I heard that, because the implications are just so huge. I can give a very simple example to show how it works. Like if I'm too hot, I'll probably just take off my pullover. Now, what happens there is that there's a perception. I'm hot. My body tells me by my senses that I'm sweating, I'm too hot. And so I adapt my behavior. I take off my pullover to get rid of that feeling, to get rid of the perception of my body that something is too hot. And very often that is the case. Well, basically the science points to the idea that most of what we do, most of our behavior is actually the control of our perception. So it's about sensual information that we get from the world, and we want to somehow keep that information into certain parameters. And that is very much linked to the idea of procrastination. And that explains why it's such an emotional process and why it's so difficult to get rid of it. Now, the only thing that you could say, like, okay, but procrastination brings so much future pain. You know, if you don't do the stuff that you need to do now, you will have to do it in the future, and it will be more painful because you have less time to do it. So that doesn't make any sense. It can't be emotional, but it is. And here's why. Apparently, research has shown that we think of ourselves in the present and in the future in very different ways. Our brains, our consciousness, don't see future selves and present selves as the same person. When you actually do brain scans and you ask people to think about themselves now or in the future, the brain waves associated, the patterns associated with thinking of yourself in the future are not different at all from thinking of someone you know, but that you don't really meet, like movie stars or something. It's a very abstract concept, yourself in the future. And that's why emotionally you don't respond to that. The future self doesn't feel pain, so to speak. So to get rid of procrastination, what can we do? Well, we can do two things. Basically, we can try to reduce the pain of the work we need to do to make it less emotionally negative. And on the other hand, we can try to convince ourselves to care more about our future selves and about our future emotional states. So how can we do this? Well, here's a few things that I've learned that work for me. I'll start with my favorite technique, which is the Pomodoro technique. I've probably spoken to a lot of you about this technique already because it's such an amazing, simple thing to do, and it really works. This technique single-handedly saved the writing of my first opera. I mean, in terms of big tasks that are difficult to accomplish, I think writing an opera is up there. You know, it's like writing a book or writing a PhD thesis or something like that. It's just a huge thing. And the first time you do it, especially, you just have no idea to even start to think about how to do this work because it's so huge. So I was struggling a lot with the writing of my first opera. And then one day I was procrastinating, obviously, and I was reading an article. And in that article, they spoke about this Pomodoro technique. And what is it? It's very simple. It's the idea that you work in chunks. The chunks usually are between 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And after such a chunk, you always take a break, like 5 or 10 minutes, and you do something completely different, preferably something physical, like maybe cleaning your room or doing some push-ups or something like that. And this really works well because it tricks your brain into feeling a sense of urgency. Like, you know that you only have half an hour to do a certain task, to do some work. So your brain gets to the action immediately. And then when the task is finished, you're not tired yet. So you feel great. You feel great that you've accomplished 30 minutes of work, but you're not tired, and still you deserve a break. And then in the 10-minute break, you just do something else. You rejuvenate your mind by being physical. And then when you come back to the task at hand, you still feel great. And in that way, it's possible to write an opera or to do anything else, really. One thing that I need to say about this is that you have to be mindful, though, of the natural cycles in your own productivity, because people have natural body cycles that affect how they work. And for some people, this natural cycle will be like 40 minutes long, or maybe 45 minutes long, or even like an hour. It really depends. So a good thing to do, if you try this method right now, if you have some tasks on your list that you want to accomplish, have been sitting there for a while, try to use the Pomodoro method, try to do them in chunks, but also be mindful of how you feel during the chunks. Maybe 20 minutes is better for you, maybe 40 minutes is better for you. Try to experiment with the time and see what works best. Okay, another thing that works really well for me, and that is more about caring about your future self, is to vividly imagine yourself in the future when the task is finished. Again, with my opera, I did this by just imagining the moment that I would be called on stage at the end of the opera to receive the applause. That is such a powerful emotional moment, and it really helped me to focus on doing the work because I wanted the people that were present in the opera house to be happy about what they experienced. And in order for them to be happy with the work that I had accomplished, I had to do the work first. So this created the idea that my future self, my future emotional self, was helping me to do whatever work I needed to be doing at that time. So this is also something you can do right now. If you have a complicated or difficult task that you've been pushing forward, sit down right now, or maybe after this talk, sit down, close your eyes, and imagine yourself, imagine your emotional state at the end of the task, when it's done, when it's finished, and when the people that are impacted by that task will actually consume it or see it. And this will help you to actually overcome procrastination because it increases empathy with your future self. Wonderful. Another great thing that works for me is using social pressure. It's also a very simple trick, but when we are alone in our minds and just talking to ourselves about what needs to be done, it's so easy to be distracted, and it's so easy to not live up to your own promises that you make to yourself. It's much more difficult to not live up to the promises that you make someone else. So a good method of getting things done and not procrastinating is, for example, to ask help. If you ask help to someone, that means they are involved in the process, and then you have to do things because they are waiting for something. Or you could also just promise someone that you will do something, even if it has nothing to do with that person. You could say, look, you could talk to your best friend and say, like, I will really write that article that I need to write, like 10 pages by next week. I promise you that. Please hold me accountable. And that will really help on making that happen. I will tell you a very simple personal story about this is what I'm doing right now. The Facebook Live sessions. I've known that I had to do this for pretty much a year now. This has been on my list for a year. Do more Facebook Live talks about stuff that I think is valuable for other people. And yet I haven't done so. I was procrastinating. It just seemed like a huge task. It's something that I didn't feel entirely comfortable with. It's vulnerable. You need to be out there. You need to actually sit down and write the talk, think about the things. So it's a tough thing. And I wasn't doing it until now. And you can ask me, okay, so why are you doing it now? Well, it's because of social pressure. It's basically because now we decided to work with a social media manager, EJ. She's amazing. She handles all our social media accounts. And, you know, she puts the posts out there that you can read. And so the simple fact of me telling her, or actually her asking me, so, hey, Joachim, when are you going to do another Facebook Live session? And then I tell her, yeah, how about next week? And then she makes this little post that says, like, okay, Joachim's going to be live next week. And I can't escape anymore. I just have to do the work. And it works. And I'm very happy that it does. So thank you, EJ. Something that you can do right now is take an item on your task list that you need to accomplish and call a friend or ask a coworker and tell them, like, look, I'm really going to do this. Please hold me accountable, or work with me on this together. And then it's easier to share the burden of those tasks. The next idea seems a bit counterintuitive. It's a tricky one. The best way to be really productive is to procrastinate. Now you'll probably be like, what on earth is he talking about? Well, listen to this. It's really powerful, but it's a bit dangerous as well. The idea is that very often you can hack your procrastination to do other things that are really important to do. If you have like one huge scary task, say like you need to write a book, and you've been procrastinating on writing your book forever, and instead you've been watching Netflix or eating chips or whatever, you can hack the procrastination by procrastination on writing the book by doing other things that are really productive. You could say like, oh, I'm going to write blog posts instead, or I'm going to do this other tasks that I have been procrastinating about, because the one huge scary task is emotionally more difficult and even harder than the other ones. So you can hack yourself into doing all the other things that you've been procrastinating with a bigger task to procrastinate on. This works particularly well for me with emotional stuff, stuff that is not really directly linked to a task I need to accomplish, but this is more like, suppose someone sent you an email and they're complaining about something and it really touches you and it's really difficult and you need to deal with that in yourself. And you know that you're going to have to, but you procrastinate. That kind of stuff is ideal to get lots of stuff done. Lots of stuff, like you need to write articles, you need to call people, you need to organize things. Those things work really well if you know that you're running away from something emotional that you need to do. Now, I'm not advocating running away from your emotions, obviously. It's very important to actually sit down with your emotions and do something about them. But it's human, and we all do it, and we will probably all keep doing it. And as long as we're doing it, we can use it to be productive instead. So try that. My last strategy to beat procrastination instead is a very tricky one, but very powerful. It's more like something you need to do to be able to get over procrastination, and that is to forgive yourself for past procrastination. We've all procrastinated in the past, and the thing is that if you feel frustrated or angry or sad about that, it's almost impossible to get over it. Because again, your emotional state is so negative. So a really powerful thing is to forgive yourself for past procrastination, to be compassionate with yourself, and to accept the fact that yes, you have procrastinated, and that's okay. And by forgiving yourself for this procrastination, you will give yourself the possibility of moving on, and you will allow yourself to actually do the work. This is a difficult exercise because it's not something you can really just do. You need to like work on that. Self-compassion and self-forgiveness are hard to acquire. They are a practice. But what you can do right now is to just sit down, take a piece of paper, and write down for yourself that you have procrastinated and that that's okay. It's very human. And write down that you forgive yourself for it. And if you write that down, that is a very good first step for actually believing that. And I believe that will make a huge difference in the long term. Now, enough about procrastination per se. Let's move on to some methods to actually be productive. Productivity itself is also interesting as a theme. So some stuff, again, that has worked well for me and that can help you. First of all, you've probably all known about Tony Robbins, who is basically a kind of productivity guru. And he has this interesting framework that is state before story before strategy. It's a nice alliteration, of course. With strategy, he really means work. The strategy is what you do, is what you need to achieve. The story is the story inside of your own mind. It's the story of your self-awareness, the story of your self-perception, the story you tell yourself, the narrative that is the basis of your life currently. And before that even comes your state, which is your physical state. And that's a very interesting thing to think about, because we very often just try to work in whatever state we are in, and that doesn't really work. The research around this has shown that both the quality and the quantity of the work that gets done greatly improves with the mood of the person doing the work. And even more so, even the outcome of the work you do in a certain state can be completely different. I've read this story a while ago that was really interesting about research done on judges that are handling cases of prisoners that may be released from prison because they behaved well or stuff like that. You know, as if you have a prison sentence, say 10 years, after 3 or 4 years, there's a possibility of freeing these prisoners because they have shown that they have bettered their lives, so to speak. And so there's a panel of judges that decide about exactly these kind of things. And they researched when the outcome of that panel was positive for the prisoner, so that the prisoner would be released. And they noticed that in the mornings, the rate of release was quite high. It kind of went down towards lunch. Right before lunch was the worst time to have your case submitted to the judges. And then after lunch, when the judges were fed and happy again, the rate of release went up. This is quite staggering if you think about it, but it's also quite powerful because you can use it for your own good. You can make sure that if you need to do difficult tasks, that your basic needs are met first. So feed yourself well, drink enough, make sure that you're comfortable, that you're not cold, you're not too hot. Make sure that you are in a physically fit environment so that you feel good, so you can actually do work. Now, of course, that's not the only part of your state. It's not just the body, it's also your mind. So you can create your own mood. Do whatever you need to feel good. For example, adapt the light, have a cup of tea. That's what I'm doing. Put some candles if you like that kind of atmosphere, or use some incense to like lighten up the mood of the room, whatever. And then you can also enhance your physical state, like with exercise. Like when I already talked about this a bit with the Pomodoro technique. So if you do physical exercise during work, in between work sessions, you just improve the state of your body. Your body feels better. Another thing is that you can laugh. You can try to laugh. Watch some funny videos for once, or talk with friends who make you laugh, just to improve your state of being before you do some important work. Or something that works really well for me and that is easily achievable for everyone is using music. I have different kind of musics that work for me for different kinds of work. And I think it's really simple for you to find out what works for you. So what you can do right now is to make a playlist of music that gets you going, music that makes you want to work, music that puts you in a mindset that makes you feel like you can conquer the world, and then do the difficult work while listening to that music. That will tremendously help. Another thing that works well for me to be productive is to break down projects into smaller chunks. I mean, this is almost an obvious one. This is something, this is kind of like a basic productivity technique. Smaller, easier to take steps will always get better results than bigger chunks of work. So a very easy technique is to sit down, write down the task, write down everything that needs to be done to get the task done. And as long as you feel resistance to the steps, to doing the steps, keep breaking down the steps into smaller steps until you feel that the steps are really easy to take, really simple, and it's almost more work to not do them than to just do them right now. And that is also a tremendous method of getting stuff done. So what you can do right now is take a task that's been sitting on your task list for a while and break it down into really small parts, into small chunks that you could do in maybe even 5 to 10 minutes. That really works. One last thing that I would like to talk about is very powerful, but kind of not easy to do. And I'm still working on that. I haven't really mastered it yet. And that is to create habits. Habits are really powerful because you kind of do them automatically, right? It's something you don't have to think about. It's something you don't really have to spend much energy on. It's things you do just because you do them always. And the neural pathways in your brain are used to do these kind of actions. So there's no resistance there. Habits are great for consistency, and consistency is the key to any kind of task that is actually recurring. That is more of a practice. So for example, meditation, your diet, exercising regularly, mindfulness, awareness, kindness, all those things are not tasks that you have to do once. They're recurring exercises that you need to keep practicing every day in order to have good results with them. So how can you make these things into habits, or how can you actually hack existing habits? Because that's an interesting thought. So creating new habits is really difficult. It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of focus. But you can also use existing habits to either change them into something that makes you productive or add certain things to your existing habits in order to be productive. Basically, according to science, a habit has three parts. There's a cue or a trigger. For example, you feel bored while working. Then there's an activity. For example, you go to the coffee break room to buy a piece of chocolate. And then there's the reward. In the example, the piece of chocolate gives you a boost of happiness because sugar. Now, this habit you have, if you do that regularly, it's a habit, and it clearly has some negative outcomes, because if you eat chocolate every day, maybe you eat too much sugar, and then maybe you gain weight, all that kind of stuff. So if you switch buying the chocolate with something else, you can basically hack that habit. Like, what if instead of a chocolate, you would buy an apple? You would already create a healthier habit. The habit would still be the same. I mean, the cue is the same. The trigger is the same. You still feel bored. The activity is different. Instead of buying chocolate, you buy an apple, but the reward is the same. You feel better because you ate an apple, so you have some sugar. There is an extra level to that. Instead of having the reward be something physical like sugar, you can make the reward into something mental, like getting something done. So for example, if you are bored with a certain task, instead of running to the closet to get some chocolate, you might say like, okay, I'm going to work on this other thing that I'm passionate about. And then that work kind of becomes the reward for being bored with the task you were doing first. That's kind of like the way you hack your habits into making them something productive. And that's very nice. Another way of using habits to be productive is to add stuff to them. Like if you have a certain habit in the morning, you always brush your teeth, or you always have a glass of water, or you always meditate in the morning. If you attach a certain productive thing to that habit, say for example, every morning after meditation, I will sit down and write for half an hour an article or the book I'm writing, whatever. Because that habit gets attached to the other habit, it's much more easy to actually form it. So you don't need to sit down and spend so much time and energy in creating a new habit. You can just use the existing habit and add a bit of work to it. That works like a charm. Okay, that was basically the end of this session. It's a bit longer than I imagined. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to join our Facebook group. I will post the link under this video. In the Facebook group, we discuss all these kind of things. We help you being productive. We help you achieve your goals. We help you create a life you love. And if you join the group, you can also get a 30-minute free coaching session with my business partner, Elena, or with me. Just ask. So I will now check if there's any questions that you have in the comments of this talk. I see many people joined. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Barbara. Yeah, you've never tried Pomodoro? Seriously, you would love it. I mean, especially for you, since you work so many hours, Barbara, I know. I think Pomodoro would change your life. So please give it a shot, for sure. Okay, I'm reading a comment here by Mark. Yeah, that's actually an interesting comment. I mean, sometimes we procrastinate on things because they're not so important. And that's okay, of course. Like if you feel that certain tasks after a week or so, they kind of lose their meaning, then there's no problem. Unfortunately, procrastination works not only on those kind of tasks, but also on the stuff that you really need and want to do. So that's why the techniques I talked about are helpful. Okay, we have a question from Kate. Thank you, Kate, for your question. The question is, how do you stop habit keeping becoming an additional source of stress? That's a very good question. Well, that's kind of the thing. If it's a source of stress, then they aren't really habits yet. The stress only happens when you are trying to form new habits, and that is stressful indeed. Once things are a habit, there will be no stress because they happen automatically. And that's kind of like the beautiful thing about habits. What helps for me to reduce the stress is, again, the forgiveness and the self-compassion. I've been struggling to keep up with my habit of meditation in the last few weeks because there's a lot of traveling and I've been in different environments, in different situations, and I find it's challenging to keep up my habit of meditation when changing my environment so much. So I was frustrated by that at first. I was annoyed by the fact that I couldn't keep up this habit. So this was indeed like a source of stress because the habit was already formed. I was doing it every day. And that was kind of like taking a step back for me. And I felt really bad about that for a while. And the only thing that works is forgiving myself for that and being compassionate with the fact that indeed there will be periods in my life where maybe I'm not doing all the things that I think I should be doing. And that's okay. And because of this, I've been able to actually take it up again. I think that's probably the best way of dealing with this. Just always being mindful that whatever you're struggling with is human and that it's okay to struggle. I don't think we have any more questions. Of course, if you have any more questions after seeing this talk, you can always post them in the comments or send me a mail. I will be happy to answer your concerns. For now, have a great day and see you soon. Ciao.